Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. David Sivier. Oh,
Right.
do you know how to share your screen? Oh, yeah, we can see you. Are you sharing a screen tonight, or I've got your slides here, haven't I?
Yeah. Can we start with the picture of Alistair Hardy?
Alistair Hardy of the Alistair Hardy Research Unit, now at Lampeter, correct?
Yep.
Top bloke. Right, give me a moment to go back and find those.
Okay. This talk has been inspired by Dr. Mark Fox's talk to us on ghostly smells going right back to the 23rd of September. Mark is working with the archive of religious and paranormal experience gathered by the late marine biologist Alistair Hardy. Hardy was intensely interested in religious experience and believed that through the collection and scientific analysis of people's accounts of their experience of the transcendent and the divine, scientists too could investigate the nature of the Almighty. Yep, there he is. Right.
Damn.
Now, can we go from him?
Dave, you might need to move back from the microphone just a tiny bit.
All right. Can we go from here to a picture of puppy dogs?
Mm-hmm.
I was particularly interested by the account in Mark's fascinating talk from a woman whose dog had changed its behavior in the last day of its life. The poor dog had been ill, but that day it had been dancing around, smelling the air and looking at the ceiling. The woman and her dog went to bed later that evening, and when she awoke the next morning, she found the poor dog had died in the night. But does the dog's apparently joyful behavior and fixed attention to the ceiling indicate they have had some kind of paranormal experience? Could it even be a religious experience? Now, this is somewhat similar to another account of canine paranormal experience one of the other speakers had mentioned in their talk sometime previously. This came from a family whose elderly dog had passed on. One evening they heard sounds of an elderly dog moving about upstairs, just like their old pet. The family in time acquired a new dog, and one day when this was upstairs, it started looking and growling at a particular corner. However, it then stopped and started wagging its tail. This was interpreted as the old dog returning to tell the new dog that everything was all right and that it could look after its people now. There are many accounts of ghost animals like dogs, but there doesn't need to be so much research on animal paranormal experience. Yep, that's the one.
I didn't take you that long.
Yeah. So it is known that animals will avoid haunted houses and react to ghosts. An article in the Fortean Times, an edited version of which has been posted on the net, also stated that, apart from encounters with ghost apes and the materialization of the spirits of Neanderthals at seances, chimpanzees may also experience crisis apparitions. Chimps have been observed apparently mourning their dead, but also seem to know when another chimp remote from them has died. So, yeah. Now, can we go on now to the picture of the endocranial cast, cast of gorillas, Homo erectus, and modern humans? It's the Farley's brain casts pick. And as you can see going down, top is a chimp, bottom is Homo erectus, second from down B is Homo erectus, and C is that of an anatomically modern human. At least we assume so. Since the 19th century, archaeologists and anthropologists have attempted to reconstruct the evolution of religion. It has been suggested that religion has its origins in magic, totemism, totemism in which a tribal community is bound together through reverence to a specific mystical creature, or shamanism. This has also been connected to changes in the human brain and consciousness as humanity has evolved. Paleoanthropologists have attempted to chart this evolution through examination of several casts of humans, pre-humans, and other primates, and comparison of the structure of these creatures' brain and the development in children's cognitive abilities as they grow. This time of the evolution of the human skull. If we can, and while we're waiting for that, Mike Parker Pearson in his The Archaeology, The archaeology of death and burial notes that many animals, such as dogs, jackdaws, and so on, appear to have an experience of bereavement. Elephants in particular treat with reverence the remains of their dead, running their trunks over them and raising up parts of the skeleton. And Nicholas Toth and Kathy Schick in their paper Hominin Brain Reorganization, Technological Change and Cognitive Complexity state that the roots of human religion very well likely predate the appearance of anatomically modern humans. Nevertheless, the appearance of cave art in the Upper Paleolithic indicates well-established religious and ritualistic behavior, as well as a belief in the afterlife and spirit world. As you can see, there it is. You can see there the expansion of the human skull and its evolution. Over the thousands of years, humanity has been, well, around in some form. So we have Australopithecus down there, Homo erectus, pre-Mousterian man, and the generalized Neanderthal type, which again produced the specialized Neanderthal type and the modern European. Now, I think what they mean by it's an older textbook, and I think the generalized Neanderthal type may well be the Heidelberg man, which is the ancestral species of Neanderthal man, and then modern Europeans. However, modern Europeans, came back to Europe from Africa after evolving there. So let's go to the picture of the paleo art mural, which shows, this particular picture shows a mural in one of the American museums or universities of cave people, anatomically modern humans. Yes, there they are, painting in the caves all those tens of thousands of years ago. Now, this appearance of art and religion has been linked to the specific appearance of modern humans like ourselves, as opposed to previous species like the Neanderthals. David Lewis Williams, in his The Mind in the Cave, claimed that religion is based in shamanism. This book argues that before the appearance of modern consciousness in the Aurignacian, 40,000 years ago, the human mind was highly compartmentalized. Although animals dream, they do not remember them. This is what David Lewis Williams said, so don't blame me. My attitude is, how do we know? They can't tell us. And he goes on, and there are barriers in the pre-modern human brain between the areas governing particular functions. These prevented humans from developing religious ideas and art and other forms of symbolic culture. It was these barriers in the Neanderthal brain that made them natural atheists and prevented them from developing art. And then, however, more recent examination of the Neanderthals has suggested that they did indeed have art and may very well have had a religion. They had jewelry consisting of sea cells tied on to pieces of thong. In Gibraltar, excavations of the Neanderthal burial showed that the deceased individual had been buried with an eagle's wing, indicating that they had some idea of religion and the afterlife. And in late September this year, it was announced that some of the superb cave paintings in the south of France may have been painted by Neanderthals rather than anatomically modern humans. At the same time, some archaeologists have also suggested that another pre-human species, Homo naledi, may have buried its dead in barely accessible caves in Africa. That's where their remains have been found, and it's been suggested that this is conscious burial. There is therefore very good evidence suggesting that spiritual impulse and religion predates the emergence of anatomically modern humans. Right. Now, can we go to the next picky, Chris? This should be the dancing shaman. If he's down there. If he isn't,
Dancing Shaman's not here, I'm afraid. We've got Rudolph Otto.
Oh, we'll come to him in a moment. Okay. Yeah, I thought I had downloaded that, but obviously I haven't. Contemporary archaeology considers that the earliest forms of religion were based around shamanism and the spirits. The mysterious dancing figure in fur-around antlers in the cave of the Trois Frères in France has been interpreted as a Paleolithic shaman. The Red Woman, discovered in a Welsh cave in the 19th century with a cache of ivory, has since been reinterpreted as a male shaman with his spiritual tools. This worship of the spirits continued into the Neolithic and the establishment of permanent settlements. The people in several early settlements in what is now Jordan buried plaster figures under their houses, which probably represented their ancestors. Right, at Jericho in the same period, 7000 BC, the skulls of the dead were plastered and decorated, in what was probably an attempt to restore or give an impression of the deceased as they were in life. And the long barrows of Neolithic Britain were communal graves. Sorry, I can't speak extempore. Well, I can, but it'll be, not as good, I think. In which the skeletons had apparently been sorted according to bone type. One example of such a grave is Bellas Abbey in Gloucestershire, which is open, so you can go in, through the entrance, and you can sort of, well, if you can crouch down enough and look around and see what type of environment, our remote ancestors were burying their dead. Thus, one chamber could contain the long bones, another skulls, another of other type of bones. This indicates that the bones had been handled while burnt and scorched soil in the courtyard outside the entrance of some of these tombs suggests that rituals have been performed there. Steve Mython then goes on to suggest in his After the Ice that the idea of gods appeared in human culture, when one or more of these ancestral spirits became more powerful or important than the others. Now, this is all highly speculative. The pioneering anthropologists of the 19th century had also considered that shamanism and the spirits were the origin of religion, and that gods were a later development. However, subsequent anthropological research showed that the peoples on whom they based their ideas on also had well-developed religions apart from shamanism. In other words, if you go by that, modern anthropology is very much a chicken and the egg, which came first. And there is one Roman Catholic theologian.
I suppose old age would be the
Thank you.
better option.
One Roman Catholic writer has suggested primitive monotheism, that religion started out with an idea of a single god, and then from this polytheism developed. But that's a bit of a which is an interesting idea. Anyway, can we go to an image of Rudolf Otto? In the late 19th and early 20th century, religious scholar Rudolf Otto argued in his classic The Idea of the Holy that religion has its origin in a transcendent or numinous experience. This includes that of the uncanny, as when someone enters an empty house. And there's a section in it where he talks about the experience of Brahman in Hinduism, and quotes from an ancient Hindu text of that feeling you get, the eerie feeling you get when you enter an empty house. And when he talks about a numinous experience, this is the type of religious experience that Alistair Hardy was so intensely interested in researching. Without going into over a decade ago, there was speculation that some monks may also have some idea of transcendence, following observations of some of them looking out into the distance. Just sat there looking out into space or the horizon or the sky, presumably during a lull in their foraging. Yep, that's him. Thank you, Chris. Without going into the vexed question of whether animals have souls, the evidence of the two canine ghost or spirit encounters suggests that not only do dogs and chimps also have a sense of bereavement, but they may also have paranormal and numinous experiences. The ultimate origins of religion, therefore, may lie further back in evolutionary history, and the development of art and religion by the Neanderthals and anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, of the Aurignacian came not because they were able to have or conceptualize paranormal experience, but because their cognitive skills had advanced so that they were able to communicate and try and make sense of them and depict them. So, what I am actually saying is that if we go back to the doggy story, clearly other animals may be able to have an experience of the sense of the divine, which I would contend suggests that there really is some form of transcendent realm out there and independent of us, by which I mean independent of our neurology, although it can affect our brains in order to make itself known, and that this primitive religious urge is perhaps clarified, depicted, clarified, put into some kind of verbal form when we as a species, whether Neanderthal or Homo sapiens, like ourselves, became capable of expressing it. And that concludes my talk. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Start with.
Well, I thought what we'd do tonight is we'd ask people to tell us about their experiences of animals and the paranormal and religion and the paranormal, and ask anyone who wants to ask David questions about archaeology or anthropology can do so, if that's good. But let's start off by just going through the questions we've got tonight. So, Caroline, do you want to run through those and see what we've got?
Yep, just bear with me.
Well, let's start off with some general discussion. David, we talked about burial mounds. Tell people the story of what happened that ill-fated night with me, you, Ben, and Hugh Wake.
Yes, yeah.
Dundry Hill.
Dundry Hill. Chris and a few of the people from college had come down to visit me in South Bristol, and not far away from my house is the road going up over the local hill, Dundry. And Dundry is the site of an Iron Age hill fort, a Celtic hill fort, which has a long barrow, mason or tump, and of course, this being the weekend, we'd gone down the pub, come back.
Was it called Something and Dagger, wasn't it?
It was Shield and Dagger, yes.
We left the Shield and Dagger. It was snow on the ground, and for some reason we thought it was a good idea to climb up a bloody steep hill in the dark.
Yes, sorry. Yes. Which is a peculiar notion. I mean, we're coming up the hill about 11, crawling up the hill about 11 o'clock. And we get to the turning, which takes you into to the tump ultimately, and started going across.
We stood up on the mound briefly because I was on top of the mound and I could look down on the city lights of Bristol because I was singing Salisbury Hill by Gabriel, because all I could see, as far as the eye could see, were these glowing points of light, yet we were high above them. And in the snow, it was really a beautiful night, and it was a clear night. And I could see all the way round. And Hugh was standing near me, I think. And you and Ben were a bit further away, weren't you?
Yes. And suddenly, this is my account. I hear a voice in my ear saying, "Run." And Chris replies to it this is what I remember. I mean, Crystal Coast, no, don't run. And Hugh heard it as well, not Ben. And we sort of like, where did this voice come from? And we speculated. We thought, well, there must be someone else on the hillside, just, messing about. But we went looking, and as far as we could see, we were the only people up there. We were the only people mad enough to be up there.
With the snow falling on a wintry night in December overlooking Bristol. Yeah.
In Bristol, yeah. So, so this, when I was young, there were various ghost stories going around. And when I say young, I mean when I was a little nipper at primary school. There was supposed to be, ghosts. Oh yeah, the hill's haunted. Yeah, which is probably what you'd expect, I think, coming from school children. But no, it's a completely mysterious experience. It's one
it was. I mean, Ben heard the voice, but didn't understand what was being said. He said he heard something.
Right.
You and the funny thing was that was it you who ran, or was it who ran?
I can't remember. I mean, I really can't remember.
Where people ran back towards the road, which comes down the right hand, down the side of the meadow.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, it was completely. And the thing was that, as I said at the time, or you said at the time, if it was some Beaker person whose burial mound we were walking on their grave, then they would hardly have said "run" to us in modern English, would they?
No.
They would have said some word that we would not recognise.
Yeah.
But we all heard quite clearly, and it's because of the nature of the field and the snow, which made it very bright. So the moon on the snow and the lights on the snow meant we could see a long way, a very long way. We could see your parents' house quite clearly down at the bottom. It was very hard to explain that experience. And it was when you were talking about burial mounds, I just thought it was an amusing experience we both had together.
Oh, yes.
I mean, there's only that and the Black Triangle, really, isn't there?
There is really the Black Triangle. Although, I mean, if we were going back to college, do you remember the banging on the walls one Sunday morning?
No, what was that?
It was back when we were in halls at college, and it was one Sunday morning, and there seemed to be banging or drilling going on.
Right.
And
was that the reason that I decided it was a water hammer, probably? So we tried turning on all the taps and the entire of the up floor, and then turning them off fast to try and create a water hammer throughout the entire hall of residence.
Yeah.
Causing a massive flood, as I recall.
I don't remember the water hammer, but I do remember those banging and then
I remember
Sunday, and so presumably there were summer is the Sunday in the 1980s when there was no.
I remember one Sunday in the 1980s when I woke up and I went down to breakfast and the door was shut and there was no one there, and for an hour I walked around. And I must have seen that awful film Left Behind, the original version of it sometime before then, because I kept walking around and everything was completely silent and no one could be seen. Yeah. And it turned out that actually I was just hungover, and instead of being Monday morning as I thought, it was Sunday morning.
Right.
Worse, it was the Sunday morning after the clocks went back.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah.
So it was actually, or went forward. So it was actually an hour earlier than I thought. And therefore nobody had got up for breakfast. But I thought everybody else had been plucked off to heaven and left me down here on my own. I remember that.
Yeah.
It shows how easily it is to get spooked by nothing. But the Black Triangle incident, we'll tell that and then we'll go on to some other stories, because at least the two of us were both there. There was yourself, JK the librarian as he is now. I mean, quite distinguished people, actually. I mean, apart from me, you, JK, who else was there? Hugh Wake, probably. Hugh Wake was in the room.
I think you was there.
And DC, probably, who's not here tonight because he's with his aunt in Cumbria.
I
was playing Bauhaus, Stigmata Martyr, wasn't I? I was playing Bauhaus, the singles, 1979 to 83. And JK got very upset because he found it frightening for some reason.
Well, Well, there, it's sort of like there is elements of the Latin Mass in there. So,
Yeah,
Roman,
Monday Padre. Yeah.
yeah.
So at that point, while that was going on, he's getting a bit freaked out by the goth music, and I turned the lights off to wind him up further. And what did you see from your perspective?
I don't think I saw anything, but I heard you two, so, you and Hugh, say, "Oh, there's a black triangle. Don't you think it's come for us?" And at that point, if I recall correctly, JK nearly crawled his way through the door.
Well, he ran away from the door because it was by the door. By
Yeah,
the door of my college room, there appeared what can only be described as a black triangle that seemed to be extraordinarily solid, and there was a feeling of real malevolence. Now, it doesn't sound like a trick of the light, apart from the fact that there was an orange curtain and there was a glass window in the door, because it wasn't originally a room, was it? It was originally a store or something.
something like that.
Because that there was light coming into the room. It was quite brightly lit, even with the light off, and we could, three of us at least, clearly saw this black triangle. And the only reason I mention it is last night I was sitting next door talking to Hugh, who was trying to get my cat to eat, because as you know, Cuddles has got cancer and he's trying to get him to actually eat more food. And suddenly he saw this. He said, "Do you remember that night we all saw the black triangle? Next time we see Dave, we have to ask him about it." So there you go. That was the only other story, and it's quite funny. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. Was when the missionaries came to our college, and the guy in the wheelchair needed a downstairs room, so I gave him my room to sleep in. Do you remember that? And I slept in your bedroom on the floor.
Oh yes, I remember that.
And then I woke up in the middle of the night talking in my sleep, as I do.
Hmm.
And you got really freaked out because apparently I was talking in Latin.
It sounded like it.
Well, it wouldn't be unlikely because I did Latin between the age of 9 and 12 because my comprehensive used to be a grammar school and they still taught, it was a middle school,
Yeah.
but they still insisted that we all did Latin for at least 1 year. And because I was useless at all languages, I ended up doing all of them. So what I'd actually said was, "All hail the air, the princes of the air, all hail the princes of this world," I think is what it worked out as based on what you told me afterwards. But the problem is that when I'm awake, I can never get the declension right. But when I'm asleep, I can do it quite well. I can go back. But I was calling upon the aerial powers of the prince of this world, which for some reason made you decide I was a Satanist, which is why the Christian Union, as you may remember, then dragged me off upstairs and tried a charismatic laying on of hands and exorcism on me.
Right.
The first time I was accidentally exorcised at college was entirely your fault. The second time was probably my own. But mistakenly exorcised, I should say. But as I always say, being accidentally exorcised, being mistakenly exorcised, it could happen to anyone. And on that note, Caroline, would you like to start taking some questions and getting other people to tell us their stories?
Yeah, we've got a couple of things coming in now, apart from air fryers, which I'm sure nobody really wants to discuss. But if anybody's got any decent air fryer recommendations, private message Ruth Morris for Christmas. So Jackie Tonks, she's got quite a few animal ghost stories and animals reacting to ghost experiences. So Jackie, over to you, please.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I used to live in a house that turned out, I didn't know at the time when I moved in, but it was a row of 5 cottages in Chudley Knighton in Devon. And I think I've talked about this. It was started having really weird things happen, and it turned out to the neighbour, it was meant to be haunted by American GIs from the war, because we found out it used to be an army hospital. But my dog would growl at one corner, and my parrot would blow kisses to the one corner, and I would feel those eyes on me. And then a medium friend sort of walked in and went, "I don't mean to freak you out, but there's something stood in that corner." And I went, "I know, because my animals and me, I sense it." And I actually had one of the things once I could hear my parrot yelling, walks in, and it literally looks like an invisible finger was pushing my parrot backwards. You could literally see it being pushed by nothing. It was really bizarre, and I shouted, "Leave it alone!" And my parrot, who'd been sort of pushing against this thing, just fell over. So it was quite dramatic. You could literally see it was almost something was pushing it. And I told them to never do it again, and they never did. So it was quite. They used to have a whole load of phenomena there, but there was also I'm trying to think of more animals reacting to stuff. Oh yeah, there was one place where the Pottery Museum is in Stoke-on-Trent. Their cat would frequently ask the phantom potter there for its food, and they would literally see it wrapping itself around the legs of something they couldn't see and meowing and looking upwards. So that was quite interesting. And phantom animals I've experienced, those that my friend who lost her cat, and she told me that her cat had come back as a ghost, and I was just thinking it's a part of the grieving. And then I could hear cat biscuits being chewed. So I said, I think a cat's got in through your cat door, and she goes, it's locked. So there was nothing in the room, and I went into the kitchen, and there was nothing there, but I could hear cat biscuits being chewed. It was dead freaky. And another friend who had said his dog had come back as a ghost. I was very skeptical, and he said, "Oh, you can see a dog shaped, where it's lying on the bed, it looks like a dog's lying there." So I said, "Well, let's straighten your bedding. You go downstairs, and I'm going to check you don't go upstairs, and then I'm going to go up." So I did, and this thing had been the bed had been completely straight. And when I got up, there was a perfect dog shape on the bed, which was quite freaky. There's another guy in Shudley Knight, and he used to be a Welsh guy, used to be a landlord of a pub in Wales, and the regulars there would frequently stroke his phantom dog, which their brains were obviously telling them there was still a dog there, but they were stroking the air, telling him how beautiful his dog was, and describing his dead dog. And this happened multiple times, and they said, "Oh, lovely dog you've got." And he said they didn't have to leave the pub quick when he told them the dog was actually a phantom dog. But he said they'd been stroking it, and they'd just been stroking the air. He said it happened multiple times. And also at Fort Widley, I encountered what seems to be a phantom horse. I didn't know anything about this beforehand. They were doing an experiment on me, white noise, and me had covered my eyes up. This student doing, I think it was degree or master's degree in parapsychology, and my earpiece fell out, and I could suddenly hear this breathing next to me. And I used to ride horses and groom them, and I thought that's a horse, and I could feel this static next to me. So I think, whoa, And then the guy ended the experiment, and I freaked out because I've got this suddenly hand touched my arm. He reckoned I damaged his hearing, but I fed back that I could have sworn it was a horse. And they said, "Oh, it's only because he'd probably been primed because the stables are just over the road. I think they're army stables there." And then we fed back at the end, and they said somebody in exactly the same spot 2 weeks ago in the same experiment swore they had a horse next to them as well, exact same description. And so they looked back in the history, and it turns out one of the horses from the stables had spooked, ran into this building, crashed down the staircase, fell, which was then quite a deep cellar, broke its neck, and had to be shot on the spot. And supposedly they just concreted over the body because it was so difficult to get this. They would have had to cut it in pieces. Supposedly they concreted over the body. That was what the story was. And this was exactly where I'd been sitting, which was quite weird. So that's what the story they seem to have collected from there. And I hadn't got a clue that was there. So I definitely wasn't primed, and neither was the previous person. And I hadn't heard their story before. So there's my animal.
That's very interesting, incredibly interesting, especially about the Fort Widley. Because I've written an article about Fort Widley, and it'll be in a magazine coming up in the next several months. But in the research that I did, I'd never heard about the horse falling down the stairs. I didn't.
It's just a thing they'd heard, whether it was true, but that's the story they seemed to get when they started asking about this other woman's experience. And and I, apart from seeing the horse in the stables, I hadn't been primed, and I definitely wasn't expecting to hear it. But you could feel this big static next to me, like going quite a distance, and I could hear the breathing just like a horse, which was quite weird. And it didn't feel nasty energy. I almost just about to put my hand out so that I could touch it, whether I felt anything there, just about. And then this guy put his hand on my arm, and I screwed the place down. Yeah.
Back in the old days when they were mining, they used to have horses and pit ponies down the mines, and especially if they were digging out Fort Whitley because it's underground,
Yeah.
maybe they did have horses there just to take away all the rubble.
Yeah, that could have been. I mean, the story about the cavalry horse might have not been a made up one. It could have been that they were horses in the mines. Because yeah, I mean, there is quite active. I had something hiss in my face in Fort Whitley, and also what was the other one? Oh yeah, they were doing a Ouija board there, and suddenly I heard this screaming, and me and this other guy ran in to find that supposedly the glass had shot across the room at high speed. And I went to pick it up, and it was absolutely boiling hot. It's literally started to blister my fingers. It literally felt like it'd been in hot water. So God knows what had gone through it, but it was quite unpleasant. So yeah, put me off using Ouija boards. But they
Yeah,
were all pretty
not something that
hysterical.
I tend to use. No, definitely not. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jackie. Um, Karen Hamilton Viles, she said she's got a story where her two cats may have seen something paranormal, and had a ghost cat experience. So, Karen, would you like to unmute yourself, please?
Yes, hello. I have shared these in the forum before, so excuse me for anybody that's already read them. But when I was still living at my mum's house, which was a early 1930s semi, we were sitting in the living room one day, and the two cats were asleep on the sofa, and then suddenly they both shot off the sofa, ran towards the fireplace, both pointing in the same direction with their hackles up, and just started hissing at this same point. They were looking at the same point, but none of us could see anything ourselves. So we tried to work out what it was, but it obviously freaked them out. So logically, you were trying to think, is there something behind the fireplace? Can they hear something we can't? But it was the fact that the two of them did it to the same point in the room. And normally, if it was something like, an animal like a mouse or a bird or something, that wouldn't be their reaction. It was the fact that they were hissing like they were afraid, which I found really interesting. Could they see something that we couldn't perceive? And then a little later, when I'd moved out of home, I moved into my friend's, I think it was Victorian or Edwardian house, and we'd not been there long. And I was in my room. It was the middle of the day, and I did lay down on my bed, but I wasn't asleep. I'm sort of certain, because I'm somebody that finds it hard to fall asleep very quickly. But I just shut my eyes, and I heard that little noise, that little greeting noise a cat makes, and I felt pressure of an animal landing on the bed beside me. And we just got some kittens, and I thought, okay, maybe one of them's got in the room. But when I opened my eyes, nothing was there. I checked the whole room, all the cupboards, and then my door was shut as well. And when I went out of the room, the cats were downstairs asleep. So I sort of felt the pressure, and I'd heard it, but nothing was there visible. I also have a couple of friends' stories about animals, if you're interested.
But before you go on with that, Dave, did you want to say anything in relation to what she's told us so far?
Yeah, I've come across a lot of accounts of doggy ghosts. I mean, one is from folklore, a bit of local folklore for Somerset, which talked about the black dog of Bishop's Lydiard, which is not a terrifying animal like old Chuck. This spectral dog, which has been seen walking around in Bishop's Lydiard, and I think it goes into people's homes, or it did, and it's got its nose down to the ground as if following this centuries old scent. And there was another story, which could be folklore. Sometime in the 19th century, a ship went down off the coast, and amongst the people drowned was a Chinese princess who was coming to this country. And the story goes that I can't remember whether supposedly they buried the girl on the seashore, and she was mourned by her dog. Yeah, presumably a little Pekingese type thing. And people have reported since that they've been on the beach and suddenly they felt like a dog has nuzzled them or licked their hand. So yeah, I mean, you black
Very
dog.
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Karen, just to talk to you in relation to the animals jumping on the bed. We went to Jamaica Inn, and one of my teammates stayed in the elusive room number 5 overnight with her partner, and she woke up in the middle of the night, and I used the clip on one of the webinars that we did, and all she could feel was that there was a dog on the bed, and this wasn't a known phenomena. So there was no priming, and when she told Corinne Besant about this, she said that only a little while before our visit, she had spoken to the previous owner. And when she was a child, the only way that they could get her to sleep in the pub with the busy noise was to put the dog upstairs and sleep with her on the bed. So that was quite phenomenal. And when they did some tracking to see which room it was room 5 that was the child's bedroom.
Oh wow.
So I know that's quite interesting, isn't it? The dogs on the bed. So what was the second part of your story, Karen?
Well, they were more other people's stories rather than my own, but they're relating to animals. So, one of my friends, I was trying to remember the town. I know it was down in Kent, but she was driving home one night, and she was absolutely adamant that there was a ghost wolf in the road in front of her, and she was obviously very afraid. Couldn't work out why it was there, but she's certain that was it. So she drove to her parents, and they said, "Oh, you've seen it, have you?" And they'd heard this sort of story of this ghost wolf, which I thought was quite unusual, as there haven't been wolves here for hundreds of years. And another friend of mine who is a shamanic, well, she was a friend of a shamanic practitioner. She isn't shamanic herself, but they came across a very strange rabbit corpse when they visited a sacred circle. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. And she felt sorry for it. Her friend did some sort of shamanic practice over it. And she saw a spirit of a rabbit get up from away from the corpse and sort of jump away from it. My favourite ghost animal story of all was actually about what's it called? The historic palace in London where the king lived, Hampton Court. And it was supposedly somebody that had gone into the kitchens there and seen the ghosts of lots of the animals that had been killed and prepared in the kitchen. So deer and geese and hens and things like that just running around the kitchen, which I thought was this fantastic imagery of these animals and what they were doing.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much. Very interesting. Dave, did you want to respond to that?
Only that the connection between humans and dogs appears to go, very, very far back in time. I mean, a little while ago, it was thought that dogs were domesticated from wolves about 4000 BC, and then somebody did a bit of genetic testing, and it turns out that it was more like something like 70,000 years ago, and I believe that in one of the Neolithic burials, there's a man buried with a wolf. Some of the very early remains of dogs are controversial because they show, they show dog features, but also wolf features as the animals are being domesticated and evolving. So so the idea of a wolf, of a ghost wolf, I think is quite plausible coming back, given that and appearing to someone, given the nature, the strange nature, it has to be said, of the relationship between those animals and us.
Mm.
And also,
thank you. Thanks.
Yeah,
it's definitely awesome. I'm loving all these ghost stories, everybody. That's really good. Bill, you said that you've got a story about a dog. Are you there, Bill?
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Jill.
No, Bill. Sorry.
Yes, it was during what was the most dramatic case I ever investigated in the days when I did investigations. And we went to interview the caretaker and his wife and their grown-up son at a school in South Yorkshire, expecting it to be just a standard interview, as we always do in ASSAP. And partway through the evening, the West Yorkshire Terrier went over towards one corner of the room, stared into it where we couldn't see anyone. Its hair stood on end and its left ear started bleeding. The caretaker's wife said, "Oh, this has happened several times. We've had it checked with vets and you can see nothing wrong." She wiped the blood away from the dog's ear and none of us could see any sign of a cut there. So that was during the interview. And then later on, when we did a vigil, an overnight vigil there, 10:30 in the night, when we were about to start the vigil in the bedrooms of the caretaker's flat, the caretaker and his wife were about to retire for the night in the lounge, and we heard a call from the lounge. I went through, and the dog was doing this again bleeding from its ear. So it was a strange effect. As the vet could find no normal cause, it appears to be paranormal. And there are lots of stories of animals being able to see ghosts or spirits, aren't there? That people can't see, and it certainly seemed to be able to see someone that we couldn't.
So, as most of you know, I live in a haunted house, and it's very sporadic and very odd stuff that happens sometimes. The other morning, Martin, my other half, came down the stairs and the dog was with him. He'd let the dog out to the toilet. When the dog came back in, they were both stood at the back door and they heard what sounded like a male voice talking. And they both stood and looked down the corridor, and his ears went back and he watched, and you could see the dog's head track as if he was watching someone walk across the corridor. And then the man's voice went off again and he just sat and looked, and his head was tipping to the side as if he was watching somebody. So yeah, I totally get that, Bill. They can see things, can't they?
Yeah.
Dave, have you had any experiences like that?
No, I don't think I have. I think my life has been rather boring in that respect. I mean, yes, I mean, if you look through a lot of books, they'll say that animals can see ghosts, or presences that humans can.
Yeah, definitely. I believe they can. But Ruth, what have you got to tell us?
Yeah, no, I'm very skeptical, so I'm not very good at believing these things. But I had a very unusual experience with a friend who came round probably about a month or so ago, and she does think she's got some medium skills or mediumship skills. But we were just sat in the living room, and a black shape, so right behind me actually where I'm sitting, but a black shape just like a cat came shooting across and then vanished. No, sorry, my son's doing a pickle now. And then and she said to me, "Oh, have you got a black cat?" And I was like, "No, I've just got Stanley, my big grey cat." And she said, "Did you see that?" I was like, "Yes." It just vanished. And then it's happened again out in the hall where I've seen a little black shape. But interestingly, when we moved into the house where the cat came shooting down, there is an old cat flap that got filled in. So there was obviously some cat here at some point before Stanley. Stanley hates any other cats and he's not reacted at all to whatever this is. So that was really quite interesting. And I just noted that I think, is it someone else put another experience very similar to that down the bottom, Patricia. So I'm doing your job here, Caroline, but it's really interesting because I know you'll get to that, but it sounds like Patricia's had a very, very similar experience. So it's just really interesting.
Thank you so much for that. Dave, have you had a cat experience?
Only in the sense that I've been mobbed once or twice or more than that by people's cats when I've been visiting them. But no, apparently there is an African superstition. Now, I apologise to cat lovers that if you there's an African that if you eat a cat's eyes, they'll give you second sight. But yeah, so obviously cats have got seem to have a sort of connection with the afterlife.
Spiritual connection. Seeing though that they've always been known as a witch's familiar as well. So I'm guessing they have been given some supernatural folklore that's attached to them before.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think the connection between cats and witches probably goes back to the Cathar heretics in the Middle Ages, because among the other things, there are among the stories being told about them is that they held these orgies going around, and they then would visit the devil, then manifest himself to them in the shape of a black cat. But I wonder with some of these stories whether some of it isn't through a kind of false etymology of the name, because they were called the Cathars. Now, also called the Cathars. Now that means the pure ones. But I did wonder if somebody, people heard cat, Cathars, and thought, oh, cat worship, satanic cat worshippers or something like that. I did wonder if it was a bit like that. But yeah, and this is just me. I mean, I don't think it's any I don't think anybody else believes in it. But yeah, there is that connection with satanic cats.
Thank you for that. A couple of comments before we move on to asking someone else to unmute. Ashleen said these stories are amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. It's lovely to hear people's personal experiences. Robert Stenton says cats are high frequency. They'll walk around and jump over invisible objects. Yep. Richard, who's left now, said his dad woke up one night when we were staying with friends with a cat sitting on his chest. We found out that the bungalow had been hit by a bomb and the family cat had been killed. Oh no. Karen has just come back to us with the name that she's talking about, the ghost rabbit, and it was at the 9 Lady Standing Stones, if people know where that was, and the ghost wolf was in Collier Street Village in Kent. Patricia, lovely to see you. We haven't had your company for a while. Do you want to unmute and tell us your story? I'll ask you to unmute if it helps. There you go.
Well, there's nothing more than what I've written, really. I just got up in the night for a glass of water. I was heading towards the kitchen, and out of the kitchen there was an unmistakable grey cat shape. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was one of mine. And then I took another 2 steps and I saw that my own were just completely, totally asleep. And I mean, cats, they don't just lie down and spark out immediately. They take a long time to lie down. So there wouldn't have been time for them to get back. But it didn't cause any stress. I just went back to sleep. It seemed just normal, but it was an extra.
Thank you. Really. Thanks for that. No, that's okay. So Karen, I'm guessing this was the story that you told us already. She said she just looked up the full experience. I can't remember what year it was. Maybe 2004, 2005. I was on my way from a friend's house in Staplehurst, Kent, back to my parents' house in Yadling quite late at night. In the village of Collier Street, there's a pond that looks like it was once a mill pond just beside the road. As I got to it, I saw a wolf in the road. I knew it wasn't a dog. It was grey-white, tall, skinny, and it dropped its head and looked right at me. I was absolutely terrified, but I don't really know why. There was no way it could get to me in the car. It just looked with its head hung low. I raced past and drove really fast to my mum and dad's, rushed into the house really flustered with my dad, and he asked if I was okay. I told him no, I'd just seen a wolf, and I said I thought it sounded ridiculous and that it must have been a dog, but said no, that they are about sometimes. Yeah, it's definitely off-putting if you see something that you weren't expecting to be there. Simon Grace, did you want to unmute and tell us your experiences? No, okay.
I've not.
So there's a comment here from Tony Percy. He said, hopefully the cat's eyes can be cooked for the same effect. You wouldn't want to eat them raw, would you?
Not really.
Well, I wouldn't want to eat them at all. I don't know why I'm saying you wouldn't want to eat them raw. I wouldn't want to eat them at all. Not my kind of thing, but I get what he means. Julie Elizabeth Boyd says cats were considered sacred in ancient Egypt and they were the cat goddesses. And then Tony's responded, Bast, the assassin of Ra. So I'm guessing that they were the names of the cat effigies that they had. Is that correct, Tony? Or Dave?
Bast is the name of the cat goddess. And I have to say I don't know that much about ancient Egypt, but I think they found mummy bundles from ancient Egypt, some of mummified animals, and the priests kept a sort of menagerie out the back. And these mummies are supposedly offerings to some of the particular gods. So, and I can't remember if one of them was a cat, but it really wouldn't surprise me if they found a mummy bundle, one of these mummy bundles of some of these poor creatures.
Yeah.
Was a cat.
So Tony said the Bast would rip out the heart of those that transgress the law and deliver them to Ra. My votive used to terrify my cat.
Ooh, that is interesting.
Explain why you said that, Dave, for us that doesn't understand that.
Well, a votive offering is again, it's sort of it's sort of like a sacrifice, but it seems to be an image of an image rather than a living animal. So I mean, you find it you did find it in some parts of the Roman Catholic Church, dating from the Middle Ages. Like if you with particular saints who had shrines that had a reputation for healing, then you'd find people would bring to them little carvings of the limb that they wanted healed or whatever was wrong with them, and leave them there as it's kind of they're called ex votus, and then you have the votive offerings of people where people will bring an image instead of dead animals. So I don't know if Tony really did have I think it does have a votive offering from way back in ancient Egypt, or or whether it's a modern reproduction. But yes, I can imagine that. So I can imagine that. Such an image could terrify an animal.
I think Tony's typing furiously as you're talking down. He's saying the votive statue was blue, so the color would pop. Cats see dominant colors, and I think the color would startle the cat, which is what he's saying. He's trying to express that.
Oh, right. Yeah. I know. Yes, that is interesting. I mean, all the all the images I've seen of sort of like bast cats, statues of cats either as Bastet herself or just or sacred to it. They've all been black. So if this one did turn blue, I think it would. Yes, I think it was. Oh, no modern.
No,
No,
no modern. Modem. I
Uh,
think that's why he can't unmute himself, I think, probably that what he was saying, is it? Yeah, I think that's why he can't unmute himself.
yeah.
Don't worry, Tony, we're reading the comments out, so it's not a problem.
Ah,
Robert Stenton said, I've had dogs in my life for many years and cats for the last 30. Their sensory perception is far beyond a dog's. The eye contact with a cat does release depending on the fellowship that you have with the cat. Thank you for that comment. Oh no, Tony said no, the statue was
modern.
modern.
It was modern.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
struggling with my eyes today. Yeah, the statue was modern. Has anybody else got any more questions? If you have, you can unmute yourself and jump on in. But I do have one myself about the dog. So we have a clock handle, a winder for our old grandfather clock, and occasionally it throws itself off the clock. And I don't just mean it drops, and there's nobody around, so there's nothing that can bump it or move it. And it's been thrown at such force on the first occasion on New Year's Eve. It would be 6 years ago this year, and it took some plaster out of the wall. It hit it with such force. It's thrown itself at Martin when he's walked past, and I've been watching it come off of the clock. But it also threw it at the dog, and the dog was lying in the corridor, and then I heard this yelp and his feet going like the Scooby-Doo comedy, where the feet go on the carpet, and then him crying. And I came down, and the clock winder had thrown itself at the dog. Now, I don't mind whatever goes on in the house, but picking on my dog, it's going to take a fight with me. That was really mean. He was terrified, and he just sat shaking, looking at something again in the corridor. It seems to be most of the time.
Yeah.
Very strange that was. I don't know why anybody would be mean to an animal.
Someone who had a bad experience with animals. I mean, a little while ago, one of the urban folklore journals published a paper clearing up a paranormal story in one of the London parks. Or when I say one of the London parks, in the Londonish area, can't remember which one, but this park had acquired, quite an unhealthy reputation for supposedly supposedly it was haunted. There were witchcraft meetings supposedly, and whatever was in this park didn't like dogs because you found the bodies of people's dogs, being killed, and there were stories about it printed in the press until someone had started to investigate it, and the dogs had been killed by a park keeper who hated dogs. The poor fellow had been a Japanese POW during the war, and the Japanese had tortured him with dogs. So he came to really hate the animals, and that was why the poor creatures, were killed. It wasn't anything supernatural, but nevertheless, I mean, it's nasty.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, poor little thing. He just sits and watches stuff every now and again, and you wonder what it is, because I have seen what I would class to be full-bodied apparitions before, but only very rarely that you would actually sense something like that yourself. But I'm sure that they can see things because he seems to watch something moving around. But
And
he sleeps in the haunted room, poor thing, so he doesn't get away from it.
yeah, I mean, I've heard, I've heard of cats watching things from other stories of ghosts I've encountered, like a flat in one of the blocks of flats in Cheltenham is supposed to be haunted, and supposedly, I mean, this is what I've heard. I mean, whether it's true or not, I cannot say, but supposedly, the owner first became aware of whatever was haunting it when he woke up one night and his bedroom door was open into the living room, and he noticed his cat watching something going on, and there were balls of light lying around in his living room.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So no, I have I have no trouble believing that cats can see things that we cannot, and that they can see the ghosts, however you may define them.
Thank you very much. I think we've run out of questions. If anybody else does want to join in, they can unmute themselves and make themselves known. In the meantime, CJ, are you there again? Would you like to add anything to this? Any cat experiences? Any dog experiences? That's if he's around. If he's not, Claire, are you still around? Tell us who's on next week.
I'm here. Hello, can
you are. Yeah, we can hear you. CJ, have you had any cat experiences or dog experiences?
Yeah. I quite frequently see a dead orange cat called Marmalade. You may remember my cat Marmalade. And he's only after he died the first time. After he died the last time, I didn't see him at all. But he's not in this room tonight. I've got Loki with me tonight. What was I going to say? Hello, Loki. Hello. Yeah, the experience I had that involved an animal was I was down at Woodchester Mansion. I'm sure you've all been there. Woodchester.
Yes.
Yep. I was doing a TV show called Most Haunted, so it was back in the early 2000s. And I was a researcher for Hanrahan Media for their live shows. They asked me if I'd be willing, if I could get a group of people who wanted to stay overnight. We were called overnighters. So we stayed outside, and there was another group of people who stayed in the building. And in the early hours of the morning, myself, Andrew, Mel, Lisa, and a few other people, Kevin and Luke, we were sitting outside. We got up early because we'd heard a crow, and we'd all been spooked by it. So that tells you how nervous we must have been. But while we were sitting there, we heard a horse coming. First, gallop, canter, trot, walk. I think that's the right sequence. And it came down the road at quite a speed, slowed down again. And then as it approached us, there was the distinct sound of someone dropping off the horse and pulling its harness and leading it over towards the building. And we heard it, and me and Mel had ridden, we both knew what it was, but there were no horses to be seen. There were a couple of cows which weren't moving, that were just gazing sedately at us. And there was the road, which we could see stretching up through the trees. But if it had been a real horse, you can't hear a horse at a great distance. It would have been within sight. So that was quite an odd experience. I put it down more as an auditory hallucination than an actual ghost. But yeah, that was quite freaky. And my ghost experience was after Marmalade died. I've had 3 cats called Marmalade, in case anyone's confused. But after Marmalade 1 died, I had a window to my bedroom, and there's a flat roof outside. And Marmalade was a big fluffy orange Persian. And I looked up at the window, and I've been quite sad, and there was a big orange fluffy Persian looking at me. And it come in through the window and was standing on my windowsill. And I saw it, I took a photo of it, and it was only subsequently I discovered it was probably one of my neighbour's cats that just happened to have come across and climbed in through the window, though I never did. It lived on the other side of the car park. So I never did actually get to know it. So whether or not it was just unusual timing if that was the case. But I took a photo of the cat and it was definitely a real cat because it showed up on the photo. Well, I assume it was a real cat.
I had a similar experience like that way back in the 90s. My bed was just under the bedroom window, which was a little way to the side, but still there. And I was sort of sleepy one night, and I sort of come to and look towards the window, and there were these green eyes looking at me. What? What? Look again, and there are these green eyes, and then suddenly this shape runs out it comes out the window and lands on my chest, and I think I shouted out, "It's Satan!" as you would. And no, it was a perfectly real cat. It was one of the neighbours' cat. It was a sort of hot summer's night, and I think they'd let it out, and it had climbed up on the roof of our extension there, I hope, and then decided, oh, this door's nice. What's in here? And come through the curtain. So yeah, I ended up putting it back outside and hoping.
That's what we did to JK. You remember Sherborne Street where he fell down the stairs when I used to live at Sherborne Street, the house that fell down?
Yeah.
We told JK's half Belgian, so we told him that there was an organ grinder's monkey, and the organ grinder had been murdered by a Belgian, and now whenever a Belgian came and stayed in the side room at night, the spectral monkey came in through the window. So that's Loki, my cat, climbed on this keyboard. Anyway, we knew full well that Summer, the little white cat who I later on went on to inherit from the neighbours, she used to come in every night to play with my cat through the window and would jump down regular as clockwork at about 11 o'clock when they put her out, because they put her out every night.
Right.
And she was a chocolate point Burman, so she was pale with blue eyes. So we told him this ghost of this pallid white monkey, and he screamed and screamed and screamed when that night the cat, or the ghost monkey as he thought, leapt in through the window and landed on him, which caused us much pleasure, as it always did whenever we wound up John about anything. But
well, there is supposed to be a couple of ghost monkeys. I mean, when I was doing my research for this, as I was trying to work out if there are any ghosts of monkeys and apes, and apparently there is one in this stately home in Wales. I've forgotten about it. I've forgotten the details, but it was the pet of one of the ladies in the 16th century, and
well, there's the famous Shugborough monkey as well.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but I can't remember the details. It's like that famous. I've forgotten them.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm gonna have to call it a night because we've got a committee meeting later tonight. But thank you very much to everyone tonight. Thank you, David. Claire, are you there?
Claire's left the building.
Okay, do we know who's doing next week?
I'm afraid I don't. When I looked the last time, there was a gap after Dave.
Okay, well, if nobody's volunteered, then it will be me, and I will be talking about something or the other.
I do know that Neil Nixon's got a talk ready to go for an emergency.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
But if not, I will always talk if I have to, and we'll work something out. But David, thank you very much tonight. Thanks to everyone who came along.
It's a pleasure.
God bless.
Thank you very much,
See
Dave.
you all next week. Good night. Good night, everyone. Good night.
Night.